Hi everybody, my name is Hist Gutierrez, and this is going to be my oral presentation for week 7's discussion board. So just going to jump right into here. Just as a little bit of a background, this is more about the background into the Native Americans and how the U.S. federal system created boarding schools, and the effects that it had on the Native Americans. So from what I've gathered from this week's chapter, Du Bois explains that the U.S. government created these boarding schools as an effort to Americanize the Native Americans. However, as many of us noticed and read, this process was not kind, and in fact, it was more of a brutal takeover. The federal government didn't give Native American families a choice in this matter. In fact, they actually forcibly removed the children from their homes with the main goal of erasing their cultural identity. These Native American girls were actually targeted specifically with the thought that they would be the next leaders of the transformation in their communities. And Du Bois also really highlights this when she states that, the girls were trained in marital occupations and within the American standards of domestic servitude. And so this means that the boarding school's goal was not about re-educating them or empowering them to see a different way of doing things, but to mold them into being obedient women that would fit within white society. And so as we go further into the chapter, we can see that the U.S. government accomplished this goal by any means necessary. Du Bois used this really heartbreaking statement where, they would hold the girls with their legs up in the air and they would whip them. And just considering how, the boarding school's mission statement, as I would say, would be about civilizing the girls, punishments like this only prove that it was more about control and domination rather than re-educating them. The efforts of the schools not only were physical, but emotional as well. The families and communities suffered immensely because of this, and even if they wanted to do something, Du Bois, she states that despite their protests, they could not stop it. And that really sat with me for a moment because it's hard to imagine the helplessness that these Native American families experienced as they watched their children be ripped away from them and be forced to endure, abandoning their culture, their sense of self. And just, it really highlights how these schools were so hostile, and it added to the heartbreak of these communities. One of the great things about this chapter, though, is that Du Bois highlights that despite all of this heartbreak, despite all of this violence, many women actually used the skills that they gained from these boarding schools to, kind of reinvent themselves, to find a sense of self and, be back with their culture, serve their community. And, there's this quote where they became teachers, they became clerks or nurses, and even activists. This not only demonstrates the resilience that the Native Americans had, but also highlights that throughout all of their heartbreak, all of their pain, they found a way to serve their people and to uphold parts of their culture, which is just, it's so powerful and heartbreaking, but just very inspiring. And so that's pretty much it for my my oral presentation. I hope that you liked it, and I wish all of you guys the very best.